Welcome to the Information War Report for June 2025. I am Brian. This is Milo. We are two of the co-founders of the Media and Democracy Project. We are a nonprofit, a grassroots, all-volunteer civic member organization. We formed in 2020, and we fight for a better informed electorate. The Information War Report helps you to understand what's actually happening in the news, what systemic forces are affecting our media environment. If you knew more facts about the world in October of 2024, you voted for the non-fascism candidate. So it is essential that we cover these issues, and it's essential that you tell your friends and family about what we do here and about how it is important that we care about everyone's media diet at a time when it's quite clear that the two information streams, the more fact-based one and the more propaganda one, are causing some people to cheer for rising fascism and others to take to the streets. Let's kick it off by talking about the AP Challenge. Milo, what would you like to say about the AP Challenge?
So great. So one of the things, thank you, Brian, and thanks for folks being interested in talking about media and democracy with us. One of the things that we think a lot about is media diets, as Brian said, what people are consuming, who is doing the feeding, what habits people have, and most importantly, how do we help people become better informed and more reality-based information sources? And one of the things that we've recognized over the years, we've been doing this for almost 6 years now, is that people have a lot of media consumption based on habits. People have grown up reading the New York Times, and the world around them is shaped by understanding what the editors at the New York Times think and say, and it's not an accurate worldview of the extremism that's happening right now in America, of the planet that's being incinerated by addiction to fossil fuels. So we've started to help people build better media diets. And one of the things that I'm very optimistic about, very hopeful about, is there are great sources out there. And really, personally, I've spent a lot of time using the Associated Press as a primary news source. A lot of folks think of the Associated Press as syndicated, but it's much more than that. It's a nonprofit, it's national, it's international, and it does a fantastic job. So the challenge to our groups who attended our May meeting, we meet once a month, and please join us on those meetings via Zoom. The challenge in May was for people to try the AP Challenge, which was try to make the AP your primary news source when you wake up in the morning and start your doom scrolling day. Instead of opening up the app or the newspaper that you're used to reading, especially if it's a large corporate owned entity, look at the AP. So bottom line, challenge to you, if you haven't already, is take the AP Challenge. They literally mention democracy in some of their promotional work. Literally, one of their catchphrases is "a free press equals strong democracy." This is not a phrase that you will see meaningfully used at large news outlets such as the New York Times or "Democracy Dies in Darkness," Washington Post.
The best part about the AP as well is that increasingly it is difficult to get pro-democracy national news. Sometimes an NBC might have a headline that's like pro-democracy and pro-public interest. Sometimes the New York Times may have that. I think, Milo, in your understanding of using the AP for the last few months as one of your more primary sources, like their frames are more pro-democracy in general, would you say?
Yes, and pro-reality. I mean, we're looking for reality-based journalism that doesn't have editorial warping of framing. And so a lot more fact-based, a lot more reality-based. We're going to talk a little later about No Kings protests. And for example, the largest mobilization in recallable memory, I think there's still some discussions, but if not one of the largest mobilization of Americans in American history across 50 states. That was a primary story on the Associated Press website for almost a day and a half. It was gone from the New York Times homepage by 10 a.m. the next day. But I just want to use that as an example. The Associated Press doesn't have an agenda. It actually covers stories. So now if there's a catastrophe, a plane crash, or something happens around the world, that's a great first place to go. And to thinking of making that a staple of your media diet.
In May, we had a incredible event with Pulitzer Prize winner Ann Telnis. She is famously the editorial cartoonist who resigned publicly. She wrote a public letter about it, or a public piece in her Substack about it, when her cartoon was censored while she was working for Jeff Bezos's Washington Post, and she did a cartoon that was critical of Post owner Jeff Bezos. Milo, do you have anything to add?
Great. It was, she's fantastic. And this is something that we brought to our community that editorial cartoonists are extra important in communicating complex issues to people. Not everybody has the luxury of reading 50 Substacks and subscribing to 20 news organizations. Most people aren't active consumers of information. They're very passive for multiple reasons. Some people don't have the privilege to spend an hour a day consuming media. Point being is editorial cartoonists for centuries, whether people were illiterate or literate, make complex issues very clear and very succinctly in a very powerful way. And Ann Telnes is the paradigm of that. She's won her second now Pulitzer Prize for editorial cartooning. But speaking to her and hearing how she thinks about where we are in democracy under siege, it was very powerful to hear her and her experience as someone who is seeing the assaults on a free press firsthand. In her case, it was not from the federal government, but from oligarch control of a media outlet that she worked for. She's got a great Substack and blog. If you haven't already, definitely subscribe to it. It's called Open Windows. You get in your inbox amazing Ann Telnes art. Subscribe and if you can, chip in and be a paying subscriber. She's just brilliant. It's really something that we suggest everyone start thinking more about. These are sophisticated memes to communicate complex issues by brilliant writers that happen to be graphically gifted.
This is really fascinating. This headline for the Media and Democracy Project blog is "The World Recognizes Trump's Racism While the U.S. Media Rarely Call It Out."
Right now, people in America have a view of the world that is presented to them by very few, generally speaking, very few corporations. We've got cable news, we've got New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, occasionally some local outlets. Now people are, maybe people on this call are obviously reading Substacks and that sort of thing. But the majority of Americans have it's almost an oligopoly control over the perspectives that are given. There are many things about the current president of the United States that are not covered regularly. And one of those is his racism. And there was an event, if you folks remember, a month / 500 years ago when Donald Trump hosted in the Oval Office where he ambushed the president of South Africa, a black man, basically was ambushed by Donald Trump with photos and a video and basically a agitprop presentation accusing South Africa of being a country racist against whites and of white genocide, attacks by blacks on white South Africans, Afrikaners, which is basically Great Replacement Theory, Afrikaner version. And we actually collaborated with an American journalist living abroad who reads more foreign headlines and more foreign news sources. And we got to talking actually over Blue Sky. And she wrote this wonderful piece looking at front pages. And it illustrates kind of the global groupthink of leading American press outlets not covering Donald Trump's racism versus the world seeing this as an ambush and even a form of racism by the President of the United States. So
it still matters very much how print media that often has digital footprints covers things and the priority that they give things, even when we see how that is prioritized on a print newspaper and the front page and where the headlines are and how big they are, because those priorities trickle down are part of the priorities of the outlet overall. Where will they put that on their digital space? How much time and attention and reporting will they put to that story? And then for the people who are the tastemakers, who are the elites, who are the people in government, all kinds of different people still consult these places, other newsrooms, especially, right? More local newsrooms. Minnesota Star Tribune could look to the coverage that the Washington Post and the New York Times and the LA Times are giving to things as they think about what the priorities are in informing the public and how they want to inform the public. So let's take a look at these. Major paper in Brazil, the Globe, they have it on the front page. They have this picture of Donald Trump. Anti-diplomatic trap. Wow. Wow. This is reflecting poorly on the U.S. press that they would not speak this way. Anti-diplomatic trap. Trump's lies turn the Oval Office into an ambush for heads of state. Incredible. Okay. Then this is a Spanish newspaper says new ambush in the Oval Office. Okay.
because remember, he did this to Zelensky. What he's
Yeah, of
turned.
course.
He does these things in the Oval Office, and now we get to see how outlets outside the United States are seeing what's happening inside the United
Yeah,
States.
absolutely. And it's going to be so demoralizing when we get to the U.S. papers. So this is the Independent in the U.K. Trump ambushes South American president in Oval Office with white genocide accusation. Trump ambushes South African leader over white persecution. The Daily Telegraph. middling, but still very prominent coverage, the entire front page of the Independent. Then we have the Wall Street Journal says Trump, South African leader clash in Oval Office, switching the responsibility for this ambush to make it
Hashtag,
a shared responsibility. Hashtag what?
hashtag both sides.
Hashtag both sidesism. Hashtag false equivalence. Yeah, absolutely. That's ridiculous, right? So we go from these first four that we saw that almost all of them mention an ambush, right? Now we have them just clashing. It's two opposing views, like you said, both sides, when really there's only one reality, which is that there is no white genocide in South Africa. So the only clashing is coming from Trump's lying and bellicose nature and that of the other people in the room. Trump broadside embroils leader of South Africa. Again, it's the New York Times headline. It's passing on some type of agency for the negative aspects of this situation onto the South African leader for some reason. Everything is a choice in journalism, and these are weird choices when everyone around the world seems to have come to the consensus, hey, this lying corrupt guy ambushed this other world leader, right? And then we can also see the prioritization by the New York Times where it is just a side column. The photo is a great representation. If we could just go back, it's like boom, photo's huge. And then like little tiny photo. And then let's see, the Philadelphia Inquirer says Trump dims the lights and puts on quite a show in the Oval Office. Very dispiriting from the Philadelphia Inquirer, which often does do pro-democracy journalism, to frame this as something that is entertaining. Like it gives no context whatsoever of the ambush that happened. And then the Washington Post says Trump confronts leader of South Africa over farmers. Again, completely decontextualizing the really, if I may, batshit situation that was created with dimming the lights and playing a propaganda video for another world leader about a purpose built disinformation campaign that originated from the Trump orbit. It is really, really wild to see. And so we hope you appreciate and enjoy that juxtaposition because we also talk about availability bias. And when we only see certain types of media and we only see media and journalism that does less holding power to account, we're not aware because it's not available to our brains and our experience as human beings. We are not aware of the type of journalism that we could be getting. And that also further aids the narrative makers and the owners of our media who don't have to contend with us being aware of what we could have when it comes to our media.
It is a tangible visual capture of the priorities and biases of the institution itself. Because guaranteed that every news organization measures every millimeter of what goes on that front page with great care.
Okay, so Milo, what are we looking at here with ending taxpayer subsidization of biased media? This seems clearly to be a biased take from our government.
There are many assaults on a free press in the United States right now and threats to press freedom. And one of them is depriving public media of funds. We do need public media, nonpartisan media. A study came out today that 13 million Americans depend on public radio for life-saving information as they live in parts of the United States that have hurricanes and tornadoes. And losing public radio will leave these people without news sources in anticipated times of crises during the climate apocalypse. So point being is this is just one of the ways in which American minds are being deprived of facts and quality news is to cut off the funding at the federal level. I think it's coming up next. Is Judd Legum's slide coming up?
Just go to it.
Let's go through it. So if you haven't read this we consider A+ content to better understand one of the most important factors right now in American democracy is the attack and multiple attacks on free speech, whether it's weaponizing the government, defunding public news sources, suing and threatening physical harm to journalists, but also specifically weaponizing different branches of the federal government against news organizations. What we've seen at the FCC with Brendan Carr as an emissary from Donald Trump, coming for Paramount CBS, holding up a very big merger, coming for Disney ABC. So those who are not familiar with like a summary, and back to our friends, the A plus AP, the AP is one of these people. For those who recall, one of the reasons the Associated Press was our Media and Democracy Project hero in January of this year is they are a fact-based, reality-based organization, and the United States does not have the power to rename the Gulf of Mexico anything other than the Gulf of Mexico. The AP has held that stand, and that's another reason why the AP is an excellent news source, but that's a good example. But using that was the beginning of how the Trump administration sought to break different news organizations' ability and desire and will to stand up for reality. So read Judd Legum's piece in Popular Info. There's another journalist, Rebecca Crosby, thank you. And the two of
Rebecca
them,
Crosby.
this is a really a valuable piece to have at hand to better understand the state of a free press in the United States.
So now we have Minnesota Reformer, which is part of State's Newsroom. State's Newsroom is an incredible project to have a pro-democracy outlet covering the state house in all 50 states. They have succeeded in establishing their own newsroom in most of them, and then they've partnered with a few statewide newsrooms in some states as well. It's great because they are a pro-democracy, fact-based news outlet, and they wrote this piece that Milo and I both found independently, and then we ran across the field of democracy in slow motion towards each other, waving it high in the air. A Democratic legislator was assassinated. Right-wing influencers coughed out disinformation. This was really, really helpful, and it's always really powerful to have pieces of news that just lay it all out. This propaganda effort by the pundits who are associated with with mostly the extreme right in this country. This was written like a week and a half ago. This has already disappeared from the news. A state senator was assassinated.
This is just showing the power of how things like social media are weaponized to alter and make an unreality for millions of people, and they are very coordinated and are very powerful. The second piece, going back to something you said, Brian, I look at the front page of the New York Times, plus most other news orgs every single day. There was a really cute story today on the front page of the New York Times, very tiny, cute photo of mangoes. I use that to highlight that editors of the front page of the New York Times did find this story on the front page about mangoes. Right? Those are editorial decisions. We're not talking about murdered, assassinated. Like the word is, we didn't even hear the word assassinated. I didn't have time, things are moving so quickly, to do an analysis of the terms used to describe what this was. They weren't killed in their homes. They were assassinated. There was a political intent behind the killing. We know that from the manifesto this psychopath left behind. But news organizations were very, very cautious about what language to use. And it's really frustrating. So let's jump to the next slide. I think the next one is also kind of piggybacks on this, is how does this happen? How do they have such influence? And slide 27 just goes right to it. This is a graphical quantification of the reach of social media accounts on Elon Musk's disinformation hellscape. All of those in red are right-leaning. All of those in blue are left-leaning or Democratic. That is an extraordinary asymmetry, and so it is hard to understand.
Are you still on X?
And why would you be, knowing that it's actually used to spread weaponized disinformation, racism, hate, anti-Semitism, vaccine denialism at scale?
Yeah.
Warp people's realities, knowing what we know, never mind the individual who is the single head of this and his agenda and his psychopathology and goal to destroy. I think he's a chaos agent. You know, some of the people that we have tremendous respect for, like historians, they're people who cross-post. But at this point, it's like a white supremacist hellscape. It's a propaganda hellscape. How can anyone still be there? I haven't.
We've got another comment from Holly, who says that she's still on X to amplify people like Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who say that we should not leave the field of battle. The reason why I personally disagree with Ruth Ben-Ghiat is because we know that the algorithm is like torpedoed. If people were seeing it, of course, but I'm not convinced people are seeing it. But I think, there is an argument that people make, Milo, and that Holly and that Ruth Ben-Ghiat make, which is that, it's the the space of battle. I like to try to speak to the people who are on the propaganda stream of information and try to help them understand. But I'm with you as well because it's just a hellscape of disinformation and hate, and it perpetuates so much of the hatred.
We could probably do a whole episode on the Atlantic itself, but there is a story in the Atlantic. There's a link there. What are people still doing on X? That was from May 23rd. And I think this was, I like the subhead. Imagine if your favorite neighborhood bar turned into a Nazi hangout. I think that's a nice way to frame it. And also, the specific question is what are news orgs doing there as well? We're not going to judge the individuals. That's not the point we're making here. But that fact-based journalists are choosing to be in this space and put their blinders on, try and make it devoid of context. Maybe that's we do a whole stream about to leave or not to leave or exit or etc. This is one of my favorite quotes. I just got to jump into it, Brian, because I want to run through it. So those folks know Leslie Stahl, respectable journalist. This is a quote that we think was really fascinating, which is, she said, to have news organizations told by a corporation, once again, this is because Paramount, CBS News, and 60 Minutes, ultimately in the org chart, are subsidiaries of Paramount. Paramount is a multi-billion-dollar media company. There's a merger pending between two titans of media that is now at the FCC, and Donald Trump's henchman, Brendan Carr, is now slowing the merger, which can cost some of the leaders, Sherry Redstone and others, a lot of money. Leaders of the Paramount Corporation are really eager to close this deal, as they have stand a lot to gain from the merger. So they've threatened CBS. They've asked to see content at CBS. Two CBS executives, the former executive producer, Bill Owens left. So two people in the leadership team of 60 Minutes have fallen on their swords, and while they did so, have called out that they are getting pressured by the leadership of Paramount to alter coverage at 60 Minutes and even CBS News. And this is Leslie Stahl, who's been a long-standing contributor and journalist at CBS. To have a news organization told by a corporation, do this, do that with your story, change this, change that, don't run that piece. I mean, it steps on the First Amendment. It steps on the freedom of the press. That's not totally accurate. I like the rest of the sentence. Corporations can tell their employees whatever they want. That has nothing to do with the First Amendment. Just to remind folks, we are fact-based here. I think Ms. Stahl is slightly misinterpreting things. It's if the government is telling the corporation to do things, that is First Amendment. But as this quote stands, it's not a First Amendment issue if corporation steps on their employees to ask them to do something. But this is the punchline. It makes me question whether any corporation should own a news operation. And that is the essence of the Media and Democracy Project, is we need local media. We need to support nonprofit. We understand we operate in a capitalist system. It's not that every news org needs to be nonprofit. They can be for profit, but they need to be locally owned and operated and really function at the best interests of the community. But it's kind of amusing to see someone who's worked at a giant corporation for so long to have what we call a Media and Democracy Project epiphany, which is, it makes me question whether any corporation should own a news operation. Welcome to the tribe.
Welcome to the tribe, Leslie Stahl. And this is a great opportunity to mention that the world's healthiest democracies publicly fund media to the tune of $100 per capita. That's not to say anything about Milo's suggestion that, it doesn't all have to be nonprofit or publicly funded, but, it's sort of a chicken and an egg, like which comes first, a strong democracy or a strong journalism? They each can't work without the other. And so, we have to apply ourselves to strong journalism and strong democracy and be civically engaged about both things, because if both are strong, we would not be in this situation. And Leslie Stahl, after decades in the business, is finally arriving at that understanding. We need it all to start with all of us. Every single person who's here is the first, seed of growing a massive grassroots movement to change the way everyone thinks about their media diets. And when I say that, I mean get them to start thinking about their media diets in the very first place. If 50 million of us just decided that we were going to spend 5 minutes every day sharing fact-based information, that would absolutely overwhelm, the billionaires and the fascists. Their program is to flood the zone with disinformation and decontextualized information. They've just had a 50-year start. That's really, besides Leonard Leo, lucking out on Leonard Leo and like his skill set, that's been their whole plan, and it took them 50 years. So if we start right now, we can do something about it. Not only is Leslie Stahl, who is an actual journalist, finally realizing how journalism works. So Bob Costas TV boy, as David Letterman called him in the 1990s. Bob Costas condemns mainstream press for doing MAGA media. There really isn't two sides. This is mind blowing.
Is it CCR song? Hey, what's that sound? Everybody, look what's going around. Like something's happening. There's a movement. When Bob Costas and Leslie Stahl are like talking to like two people who worked in corporate media for a long time are saying this is not right. There's something happening here. And people on a Zoom on a Wednesday night looking at us talk about this stuff. There's something happening here. And we are the change we wish to see. Just to remind folks who are newer here, Brian and I are volunteers. This is our Civic org. You can join us via Zoom. I just dropped a link in the chat. We're actually working on solutions. We've gotten involved in taking Fox and the Fox News Channel to the FCC to try and deny the Murdoch's relicensure. We've got a local journalism directory to help all of you find local news outlets that can be a sustainable part of your information diets that are good for your community, good for yourself, and you can share those. So we're also about solutions. So we're not just talking heads about this stuff. We're knee deep in this, and so just wanted to make that little sidebar of we're actually interested in what you can do. So please use this as an opportunity to kind of learn more about us. Go to our website, come to one of our meetings, and right on cue, Brian and his wife, partner, built this wonderful interactive website for us. That is a 50-state map. No matter where you are, there are some local outlets that are credible, not pink slime, not hedge fund owned, not trash. So please do poke around and find a local news outlet, support it, support the local outlets, and also find a good nutritious source for your local news.
Local journalism is democracy's immune system. Sorry, sometimes I can't help myself.
There may be folks on the call who took to the streets, expressed your First Amendment right to demonstrate peacefully in the United States and standing up for your right to express yourself. So did 5-6 million other Americans. This is a fantastic effort to quantify the number of people who took to the streets and what may be the largest single day of mobilization in support of democracy in American history. And this is a neat website and effort by this fellow named Elliot Morris, who in his blog, Strength in Numbers, where he's actually got a spreadsheet. So if you participated in an event, you can log into the spreadsheet at this Strength in Numbers website and make sure that your action did get counted towards the total amount for No King's Day. Mark Jacob, who we admire tremendously, is a former Chicago Tribune editor, is now engaged in a lot of pro-democracy media criticism. He's got a blog called Stop the Presses. His blog about No Kings was National Media Yawn When Millions Protest Peacefully. So you may not have seen yourself on the front pages if you did get on the streets on June the 14th, but we noticed and did a blog post where we looked at front pages again as a snapshot of editorial priorities and looked to see how different news orgs covered No Kings. This is a really, we think, insightful effort to demonstrate editorial biases and show people why it's so important you find those local news outlets, subscribe to them, nurture them, share them. We'll just kind of take a peek at what we've done here is we came up with a basic grading system of what were the frames, the degree of coverage, what was the headline, with the largest number of pro-democracy people taking to the streets.
You know, George Floyd was 15 to 25 million people spread out in smaller actions all across the country over the course of months. This is somewhere like 6 million Americans taking to the streets on a single day. That's the biggest news of the year, really, honestly, right? Like, that's huge news. And in the way that it bleeds its leads, in the way that war is going to get more coverage, that a single, act of dropping, very large bombs in one evening is going to get coverage that lasts for weeks. And in many ways, it's deservedly so. And that's what journalism should be doing. This is a bomb drop of civic action, the likes of which our country hasn't seen ever. And so that is the underpinning of why Milo did this work and how important this work is this is democracy manifest. Thank you. And it is, it's fascinating to see this coverage.
Different news orgs varied tremendously. So let's look at the New York Times. They literally did a simultaneous coverage of the largest mass mobilization in Donald Trump's pity party in DC. That literally is military might, protest power. as opposed to differentiating them. This is like a bizarre false equivalence or almost both sides, like depending on how we want to define this. The actual story of the protest. This is now on Sunday. This event was on Saturday. So the editors of the New York Times had time to decide how they were going to communicate this and prioritize this on their timestamped New York Times Sunday front page. A million people get the print Sunday sometimes. The text actually devoted to that protest, Brian, is that little tiny red box. That the whole front page. That's it. So there was a photo of what happened in New York City, which is an ambiguous kind of wide open lens. It's a nice photo, but it doesn't capture what actually happened nationally or the extent. So in any event, the actual coverage was that little tiny.
I'm going to point out one or two things here. It says, what's the headline? The headline is Military Might Protest Power. The headline for this page 20 that they refer to in this little blurby is Fighting for Our Future. Fighting for Our Future. It's a quote. I don't know how many news readers really understand that if there's quotes, it means that it's not the newspaper saying it per se, but it's a way that newspapers can say something that maybe they want to without, appearing quote unquote biased. But Fighting for Our Future. That's what that says. And then I can't help, Milo, I know we're pressed for time here, but look at this Peter Baker piece. Strongman at home disdains conflicts abroad. Well, that didn't really age well.
That held up. This is June 15th, so that's 10 days ago.
A president's complex military relations. Again, this is just utter normalization, right? It seems, for me and Milo, it feels weird sometimes to continue to talk about normalization because the normalization was inappropriate and too much in 2015, and it has only carried every single day since then. But this is insane. I'm sorry. This is nutso butso. Donald Trump is a narcissistic sociopath who only cares about himself. He has never been a morally respectable person. This is not a partisan thing to say. That is a true fact about the world when you put all of the facts about him together. And just to see this normalization is just really wild. And then also we spoke earlier about the use of the word assassination and the use of words in headlines. And Minnesota politician dies? Suspect carried a hit list? The Minnesota politician didn't die.
He didn't
the
die.
Minnesota politician was murdered.
Yeah. Oh, man. So folks, we use this. We harp on the New York Times for multiple reasons. One is it is the agenda setter for much of American media. And also it is syndicated. Many local news outlets pay to get New York Times copy headlines and stories and run them. And we'll see that in a little bit. Let's show some good ones. Let's show people like what local news did. Look at these headlines. What democracy looks like. Why thousands marched in South Florida. Miami Herald. Great headline. Huge picture. Make American flag. Props to the people in LA who made a giant 100-foot by 20-foot.
That's cool.
The People Constitution that they carried through the streets. And the headlines near No Kings protests sweep LA, but above the fold, huge headline, massive photo, some inspirational image. Because one of the things that we talk about in this Substack is seeing other people protest, license other people to join future protests. It's not scary. It's not tear gas. It's not getting beaten by federal agents. It's making fun signs. It's having community around taking to the streets in support of our communities and our democracy. And seeing this on the front page, hearing this on the evening news empowers people and actually licenses people. So these are the images that are engaging. Peaceful dissent, Pittsburgh Gazette. Great headline,
yeah.
Right? Next one. Philadelphia Inquirer, crowd strong Philly and No Kings protest. They use the headline, tight framing, No Kings. This wasn't about Donald Trump. This was about No Kings. Next, Houston Chronicle, No Kings protest, draws 15K. You got to, by the way, sidebar. There's advertising on the front page of a lot of these front pages. And the Houston Chronicle, this guy definitely pays for front page for his. I don't know what he sells, but let's just say that he's always on the front page.
Props to this guy.
Wait to this guy to command the front page of the Houston Chronicle or whatever that is. Next one, let's go to the Globe. The Globe. Look at this. Look what the Globe did with this.
Wow. Yeah.
Pride, protest, and violence. If I'm in Boston, I read this thing, I'm thinking I may not want to go to a protest. Like, are those three things related? Next, let's do some. I want to go to some of the hyper local. San Francisco Chronicle forgot to even cover the story, but this is what's a lot of fun. The local, your little tiny papers, the one that are locally owned and operated. They had the best signs. They show pictures of their neighbors. They're tight photos. You see people's faces. This is what democracy looks like. Next one. I want democracy. I mean, imagine the New York Times put that on the front page. Heaven forbid. Next one. I mean, I don't want a dictator in this country. In Spanish, no, we don't have kings in the United States. Love it. Next page. We have to stand up. I mean, do you see these framing choices by editors at the micro hyper local? This is exciting. I get all fired
Yeah.
up. Stand up and say something. There's your quote, using the quote aspect. It's about honor, the Virginia pilot. Look at the size of that font. That's like Japan Attacks Pearl Harbor size font. And it's about honor at the Virginia pilot.
We all need to be the media in this time. You're here watching this because you have at least 1% of your body is made up of activist energy to change things for the better, to lift all information boats in order to lift all boats of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And so when you see something like this, when you see pro-democracy frames, when you see pro-democracy information that is fact-based, and we can help you, the Media and Democracy Project helps you find that fact-based information. Use fact-based pro-democracy information and spread it. How can you spread this article from Media and Democracy Project so people can start to understand how our outcomes are made by how our coverage is made?
And let's talk about some upcoming events. We'd love to have people join us. Like, this is you can, engage with our work. Our next big event is actually July 17th via Zoom. We are hosting an event about local journalism. There are some fantastic local outlets led by some real heroes in local journalism. These are going to be outlets, one in North Carolina, one in Mississippi, one in Michigan, and one in New York. The moderator is going to be from a journalism school at Montclair State in New Jersey. So we've got 5 states represented on this call. And come and hear about some of these local outlets. And we're looking to hear from them how we can help them replicate, learn best practices, and also hear some positive things. We just gave you a lot of, New York Times kind of sucks, and there's a lot of bad big corporate media out there. But we believe that the future is local. The future is hyper local, and we can be more impactful in supporting local. So please come to this event on the 17th. Spread the word to your communities. Hear about local journalism. If you know some journalists, some editors, we'd love to have you come. So sign up for that. It's going to be pretty exciting for us.
That is the same day as the John Lewis mass mobilization. I think an amazing thing to recommend to your group is a day of protest and civic engagement and mass mobilization, followed by the double whammy of attending the Media and Democracy Project's Good Local News panel, because journalism is democracy's immune system. Taking to the streets is a way of influencing people's understanding of what's happening in their world. And sense is made of our world using pro-democracy journalism or right-wing propaganda. So which one are you going to choose and boost and engage with? So I think after you're done mobilizing on the John Lewis Day of Mobilization, join us for this event. You can go to our website, mediaanddemocracyproject.org, click on events, and the very first event listed will be this Good Local News panel and a button, a link that you can click to sign up. So what other things are we going to promote right now at the end of the evening?
Our next Mad Monday. We do a version of this where we play some editorial games called Heroes and Zeros, and also Language of Our Times, where you guys get to vote what should be front page but isn't. So you can build your media criticism and improve your media diet by coming to one of our sessions via Zoom. The next one is Monday, July 21st at 7 o'clock Eastern. And you'll see myself, Brian, and some others of our team talk about some of the work that we have ongoing, and you can plug in and help us do some of that work. We'd love to connect with your organizations. If you'd like to build out a media, watchdog group or get involved in how do you support local journalism, we're very interested in press freedom. Last month, we had Scott Pelley, we nominated as our Hero of the Month. You can help sign on the letters that we send to these folks. And so we would like you to engage with us as we engage in advocacy for a better informed America.
G Ace asked thoughts on ground news. Milo, I think that again, sometimes Milo and I don't get the chance to talk as often as we would like to. And Milo, I think you should understand from the front lines that I'm on every day that lots of people ask about ground news. I know that a project you're excited about with Matt is thinking about people's media diets and putting together healthy media diet things to recommend to people. But ground news is the thing that people are turning to these days, and so ground news is a combo news aggregate site as well as media bias sort of site combined together. Places like Ground News, if it helps you to get pro democracy information, that's cool. But media bias sites in general get something majorly wrong. It's not about left versus right. All journalism, all propaganda has bias, right? There is no such thing as objectivity in journalism because everything is, at the end of the day, a choice. We talked about the choices in headlines, just the words used in headlines, every paragraph of every article, what to cover, what not to cover. The question isn't right or left. And when Ground News says, well, the right is covering this a lot, and so you have a blind spot in your news consumption. The reality is that the right has purpose built a propaganda system over the last 50 years. And I often get people who challenge me on that. That is a real fact about the world that has been written about. Scholars have written about it. It's a known fact about the world. And so when they point out that the right is saying stuff and covering this thing, well, oftentimes those are products that are created in right-wing think tanks to then be part of our national conversation and distract us and get us riled up about things and to keep us from doing what we should be doing in a democracy, which is having opposing political ideologies and coming to solutions based on reported facts and fact-based information. I don't think we can recommend it as a place to, believe that you are getting the full spectrum of news because they categorize a propaganda system and infrastructure as like news.
I think one tiny piece of just add to that is media ownership is absolutely asymmetric in this country. So when you start having sites that try and find some midway of what is being covered, it's a distortion of what is actually happening. There is a giant right-wing media infrastructure. There is a corporate media center-ish, and there is nothing on the left. So by definition, if you're trying to find something in the middle, that is actually abnormally reflected to the right. There is no left. There is no left news. There is no, I mean, we can say, yes, there's a couple radio stations in LA, but in terms of you were to quantify it, I'm sure it's 10,000 to 1. Part B of this is, as Brian was saying, there are many news sources on the right that are basically disinformation. Fox News is a propaganda disinformation factory. So to try and incorporate that in any definition of actual news warps where the norm or the midline actually is.
When we talk about regular civically engaged Americans who, their media diet is middle of the road, that pervasive idea that mainstream corporate media is left is really overwhelming. And it really has taken over people's understanding of our media ecosystem. And I think that's like sort of the first thing for everyone to understand. Join us in keep being civically engaged, be the media as best you can. Check out mediaanddemocracyproject.org. We'll be doing this in another month. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We are really just gratefully appreciative of your engagement and your time with us tonight. So please, how can you tell people about mediaanddemocracyproject.org? How can you tell people about how they need to care, not just about their own media diet, but about the media diet of every single American? We would not be going through many of the things that we are going through right now if we all were more high information voters as opposed to low information voters. Keep standing up for democracy. We will see you in a month, and we'll see you at our next meeting after the John Lewis Day of Mass Mobilization. We will see you at our event. Sign up for it at mediaanddemocracyproject.org. Bye-bye.